Hi, this is Caroline from The Happy Sensitive. I wanted to do a series on some things that I'm seeing in spiritual messages, channeled messages that stand out to me as being very, very problematic, either because they could be misinterpreted or because they're literally telling you to do something that is actually really, really, really a problem. And so I just want to give you some examples. And in this video, I want to give you an example from the screenshot I'm showing you here. I'm not going to be sharing who channeled this or because it's not relevant. What I want you to learn to recognize is certain ideas that are problematic and understand why they're problematic. Because there are ways to deal with your emotions that are healthy, that are healing, that help you integrate, that help you internally connect, ground, be yourself. And then there's also many techniques out there that cause you to dissociate, to spiritually bypass, to disconnect. And unfortunately, some of these techniques are mentioned in channelings and spiritual messages, either maybe because sometimes the channeler doesn't really realize what she or he is saying, right? Channelings are ideally, they are a source of higher knowledge, but in practice, of course, a channeling happens through a person and through their own mental filters and through their own ideas. So let's assume the best possible scenario that the original message that was trying to come through was very, very positive, but sometimes people's own ideas and own filters and own preconceptions get in the way, and that gets into the channeling. Of course, you could also argue that maybe there are channelings out there that are messages from energies or beings that are not benevolent, that are not helpful. They just sound very good, right? But I'm not actually interested in figuring that out. All I want to do is point out that there are some very, very specific ideas you have to be careful about. It doesn't matter who supposedly says it. It doesn't matter who supposedly channeled this and how reliable you think they are. Certain practices are just very unhealthy. Okay. So let's look at this one. So this is just part of a longer channeling. And it's about envy and hatred. So I'm just going to read this out. So it says, redeem envy and hatred. Meanwhile, you, beloved human, are called upon to keep real, true, and deep peace. Nothing wrong with that. If you have not entered your kingdom of peace, since you still find remnants of envy and hatred within you, then detach yourself from them and thereby redeem humanity. This is terrible advice. This is what I wanted to point out here. So this idea that you can find peace by disconnecting yourself from remnants of envy and hatred. Okay, there's a few problems with this idea. First of all, this idea of remnants of envy and hatred. So you might feel hatred, but you're not supposed to. Right? You're supposed to be beyond those feelings according to this message. So if you still have remnants, almost like garbage of envy and hatred, you have to just pretend it doesn't exist. It's there, but you're just like, nope, not seeing it. I'm detaching from it. I'm ignoring it. I'm disconnecting from it. It's not mine. Nope. Nothing for me to, nope. No problem. I'm fine. I don't have any envy or hatred. Whereas the healthy thing to do would be to say, hey, I'm noticing some envy, I'm noticing some hatred. By the way, envy and hatred they're thrown onto one heap here, like they're both really bad. Hatred and envy are very, very different, right? Hatred is about yourself, what you're feeling. Hatred is trying to tell you something meaningful about something that's happening in your life. I'm not going to go into the details of that. Here I have a whole bunch of classes on anger and hatred in the Happy Sensitive Library, where I go into the ins and outs of misconceptions about hatred, how to be present with your hatred, what is really trying to tell you, like a different theoretical understanding of like what should you be looking for when you have hatred coming up. Unfortunately, many spiritual messages, including this one, just assume that hatred is just bad. Hatred is just a bad thing. It's a bad remnant of something you should get rid of, something you should be beyond. That is not realistic. As a person, as a human being, you are going to feel hate sometimes. And the hate itself is not a problem. It's all about how you deal with it, right? Just because you feel hate doesn't mean you are automatically forced to commit some kind of hate crime. There are many steps in between those two, right? So you can feel your hatred and understand your hatred and connect with it without having any kind of negative impact on anybody, and actually just learning to understand yourself and your needs better. So just saying that you have to just disconnect from it, detach yourself from it, and then it's resolved is really, really messed up, because it is kind of feeding into that idea that hatred is just bad, period. It's not about how you process it. It's not about how you deal with it. No, it's just bad. It's very simplistic, right? It's like saying money is bad, or power is bad, or influence is bad. All those things or fire is bad. Fire can be used to keep you warm. It can also be used to destroy someone's house. It's all about how you use it, right? This is also true for emotional energies. It's all about what you do with it, not the energy itself that's good or bad. Now, envy is a little bit different, because envy is really directed at someone, right? You don't want someone else to have something that you think you should have or they shouldn't have. So envy is more negative in the sense that it's not a pure feeling. There's a lot of kind of negative baggage, negative ideas attached that create envy. So, but even then, if you feel envious, it's something to look into. Like, what am I envious of? What do I really want? What are the things that I can do to reach my goals instead of being mad at someone else, right? So even envy is not something you would just want to disconnect from. Okay, so the idea that feelings are just good or bad and that there's a lot of bad ones you should disconnect from is misguided, but more than that, is dangerous. If you chronically disconnect from your feelings, and this is why I'm highlighting this, because there are a lot of spiritual ideas out there that prescribe this. You are dissociating, and people who chronically dissociated eventually get into a state that I call psychic narcissism, which is where they get so dissociated from their own body and from their own feelings that they flip an inner switch, and they actually turn on a kind of energy vampirism, a kind of energy parasite, like a parasite solution, where they're like, okay, they start taking energy from other people, like life force, feel good energy from other people, and they become a really negative influence on others. So ironically, all this stuff about redeeming humanity, if you want to be there for others and you want to be a positive force in the world, you need to not follow this advice. Don't detach yourself from your feelings. Don't push them away. Don't pretend that if you just distance yourself from bad feelings, that they just go away and then you're good and you're redeeming humanity, right? So what I particularly don't like about this message is that it really encompasses psychic narcissism as an ideal philosophy, because many psychic narcissists believe that they are actually enlightened. They believe that they are the next stage of humanity. They believe that they're better than others because they only have positive feelings. Why do they only have positive feelings? Because everything that is not in their mind, in their eyes, positive is something they've disconnected from. So if you imagine the body like a house, what they're doing is they're living in the attic, and they only take the nicest things with them, and everything that they don't like, they just throw into the basement, and then they pretend it doesn't exist. But it's still there, and it's having a negative impact precisely because it's being ignored. So this is a really unhealthy prescription, but it's very, very common in spiritual channeling, spiritual communities. Like, this person is saying, this is channeled by the ascended masters, right? So you read this, the ascended masters are saying it. This is another little narcissism trick, where it's like you've got somebody of higher authority who tells you how you're supposed to be, and you want to be part of that elite group, so you just take everything they say to heart. That's kind of what this is, regardless of whether this supposedly comes from ascended masters or not. Just the idea, right? Presenting it this way, this is coming from the ascended masters. It feeds into that narcissistic tendency of like, oh, I want to be, I want to be part of the elite group that is better than everyone else. And this is why this is so problematic. I have no problem with somebody channeling something and then saying, hey, I feel like this is coming from the Ascended Masters. Totally fine. But in this context, giving really bad advice coupled with, oh, it's coming from the Ascended Masters. So even me saying something about this, commenting on this, there are going to be people who watch this video and you're like, Caroline, how dare you? How dare you say something that contradicts what the Ascended Masters are saying? Clearly, you are a lesser being because they must know, because they are the Ascended Masters, right? But I want you to, when you read spiritual messages and channeled messages, and I think they're interesting. I think it's interesting to see, even just to get a different possible perspective on things. What I really want you to do is ignore who supposedly this is coming from. Instead of we are the Ascended Masters, it could have just said, greetings, bibbidi-boo, Because if you take that status out of it, like, oh, this is coming from the Ascended Masters, then you can evaluate what is being said more critically and really look at the message that's being shared. Does this actually make sense? What are they actually what is this message trying to get you to do? And is that healthy, right? And then there are messages out there that are supportive, that are healthy, that are helpful, and it doesn't matter if it's supposedly from the Ascended Masters or, the angelic bloody black group or just somebody's higher inspiration. It doesn't matter, right? And when you can look at messages that way, you run less of a risk of getting into trouble. But if you take this very literally, you're like, I know this channeler, they're channeling the Ascended Masters. It's a problem. Another thing that's relevant to know about channelers and in general is that if for someone to channel another being, another energy out there, very often they have to kind of in some way step aside or leave their body. And the people who are very good at that, unfortunately, tend to be people who are already very dissociated from their body. Their ideal of spirituality tends to be get away from the body, get out of the body. And so these are people who in themselves already have these ideas that anything that doesn't feel good is something to just ignore and get rid of and dissociate from. So that means that the messages that confirm that will be messages that they like, that confirm what they already believe, and they will just be more likely to put that out there. But also, even if they had access to really, really pure and 100% true source of information in some way, then the moment their own mind translates things a little bit, it's more likely to bring in these kinds of ideas. Because detach yourself from them could just be a bad translation. When I try to think of like the best possible intention behind this message, it might be something like, if you find yourself experiencing envy and hatred, then take a step back and assess, what are those emotions really about? What are they trying to tell me? Instead of getting stuck inside of them and seeing the world through those eyes, right? So that could be interpreted as, oh, just detach yourself, but it's actually very different. So there are ways in which maybe the original message was not about dissociating and not about pushing away your feelings. Maybe the original message was trying to encourage you to notice when you're not in a peaceful state, and to notice, like, wait a minute, am I getting caught up in certain painful, dramatic thoughts and perspectives that are not helpful? And can I take a step back? Can I access my peace again? And from there, reevaluate. Those are all helpful steps. But that's not the same as literally detaching yourself from your feelings. Even if, again, it doesn't matter if they're positive or negative feelings. All your feelings are trying to tell you something. Okay, so the last part of this message: stifle the swelling flame of envy. Remove the ground from the all-destroying fire of hatred. This might be good advice for someone who's really wrapped up and lost in their hatred and that hatred is not really an intuitive emotional response. It's more of like a mentally fed version of reality where they get really caught up in negative ideas about the world, and then they start to feel hatred because of that. And then there comes a point where it's more helpful to step back and just stop doing that, right? So this could be helpful advice in that way for some people, but it's just the way that it's framed and the way that it's set up, where it's equating hatred with always being bad and always being something you have to get rid of, and also in suggesting that someone who never feels hatred is like a better person, is like enlightened, has raised their vibration. When in reality, as a person, you are going to feel hatred sometimes. And if you never feel hatred, it means you're just disconnected from that feeling. It's in your body somewhere. It's in there somewhere, probably hurting as some strange ache or pain, trying to get your attention. But the hatred is going to be there because it's just part of the range of human emotions that are just normal. There's nothing wrong with it. The only good or bad is about how you deal with it. And the right way to deal is not just randomly detaching yourself. All right. I hope this was helpful. If you'd like to hear more about my take on emotions and actually get specific techniques, which take longer to explain than I have in a video like this, check out the Happy Sensitive Library. I have a whole series on difficult emotions made easier. So I really dive into all those like bad feelings that you're not supposed to have, and what are they really trying to tell you, because they're trying to tell you something. And it's good. They're trying to help you. They're not bad or evil or whatever. They're just trying to help you. All right. I hope this was helpful. Thanks so much for listening. Bye-bye.